Welcome to the Ask an Accountant podcast, where we demystify accounting by simply asking your pressing questions to the industry's best and brightest. My name's Tony Wilson, your host, quirky friend, and absolutely the most total accounting nerd maybe that you'll ever meet. I don't know. Who knows? Today, I'm joined by my friend, Mark Corum. By day, he is an ERP software developer for a multi-million-dollar company. And by night, he is the founder of MonkBe, a SaaS product sold as a Google Chrome extension that works with QuickBooks to make QuickBooks fun instead of frustrating. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate the great introduction there.
Anytime you're on my show, I will introduce you like
That's
that.
what I came here for, the amazing
Introductions.
I can now put on my LinkedIn profile, amazing SaaS founder, quoted by Tony Wilson.
That's right. That's absolutely right. You are a SaaS founder. I feel privileged to be interviewing a SaaS founder on my show. This is amazing. Quite incredible. So a quick logistical note for everybody. I don't know if you can hear it. I'm normally pretty nasally as a speaker. I'm extra nasally right now because I am still recovering from COVID. So if you hear me coughing or if you see me try to put myself on mute and I'm not successful in putting myself on mute, you will know I'm trying to cough. And anyway, so hopefully it's not too disruptive today, but we'll find out. We'll see what happens. Anyway, Mark, I'm super excited to have you on the show today because it actually breaks up the flow of the past few interviews we've had, right? For the last 3 interviews, we've been talking with people who own their own specialty bookkeeping practice. But you don't. You are not a specialty bookkeeping practice. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Right. So, So you maybe just want to give us a little bit about your background, your story. Like, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. So I was an accounting student in Greensboro, North Carolina, UNCG. I had gone through the program. I knew I was going to be an accountant ever since I started college. My brother actually was an accountant before I was and went into public accounting. And I saw from what his experience was, like the somewhat the terrible life balance that occurred in certain months of the year. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't fit with my personality in any way, shape, or form. I know that without even having to join in. So I decided straight off the bat, go into owning my own bookkeeping company. And so with that being said, I created Creative Digital Bookkeeping, which I think for any of you accountants out there, you might think that's a funny name because you never
accounting.
necessarily want to put creative and accounting in the same words, but I kind of thought it was a fun nod. I created that, and it was for digital marketing agencies. And I had some reasonable success with it until eventually I just realized, when you have a couple of clients, any kind of flaws with character flaws that come along with bookkeeping, not too hard to get past. But once you start getting a significant number of clients, you start to kind of see the cracks in terms of whether your personality really is a good fit for bookkeeping. And so I kind of made a transition, and I actually kind of just stumbled my way into programming. It turns out that the part of me that liked solving problems when I was doing like book cleanups was the part of my brain that also worked well when it came to programming. And so here I am today, now working on an app to make QuickBooks a little bit easier to use inside the browser.
That's so cool. That is super cool. And it's, I think one of the things I love about your story is, people can think, hey, I'm going to go to school for accounting and it's going to look like a very specific thing. My career track is going to look like that. But you are living proof that, sky's the limit. If you want to go to school to become an accountant, you might not end up doing accounting for the rest of your career.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the cool things about accounting in general is that it's a flexible job. Or it's a flexible set of knowledge, I should say. Mm-hmm. You can do so many things once you have accounting knowledge. At least I feel like that way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So you want to talk to us a little bit about that pivot that you made from bookkeeping to software development. What was that pivot like for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of I stumbled into it. I went to a coding boot camp, and that was a interesting 3 month whirlwind experience of learning how to program, and I enjoyed every second of it. It was absolutely just a blast. At the same time, I still had bookkeeping clients at that time when I was in that 3 month class, and coding boot camps are notorious for being big time sucks. So it was a little bit of a fun experience there. Um,
Fun experience in quotes.
I think sometimes I like being extra stressed out. You know what I mean? It
I get that.
sometimes you just like going for that. But yeah, so the pivot was it was not a super easy pivot.
Hmm.
But luckily I had good relationships with the people who I was working with.
Hmm.
So that was kind of a good and a bad thing because it's kind of sad to let people, go and let them know like this isn't what I'm doing anymore.
Hmm.
But at the same time, they're nice people. I never worried about getting like yelled at or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, so the timing of this all, you were telling me January of 2020, you did the coding boot camp,
Yes.
finished up March of 2020. What great timing, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but you had still been doing your bookkeeping practice, kind of winding down for the
Yeah.
remaining 2 years. I mean, you just finished in January, right?
Yeah. I still technically have two clients that I still work with to this day, actually.
Oh,
One of them is actually in the process of moving over to their new bookkeeper, so I'm excited about that. The other one, I'll figure it out eventually, one day.
yeah. And I imagine if they're listening or if they're going to find this eventually, it's not because that you don't like them. I mean, if anything, you like them. That's why you've been
Yeah.
working with them for as long as you have. It's more because there's just an alignment thing. You want to make sure you're aligned in the work that you do with the thing that you're really passionate about. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that's definitely the case. So, yeah, like I said before, I mean, the thing I love about your story is that it opens up so many more possibilities about what it looks like to start a career in accounting and just like let people know that, you don't have to be counting beans for the rest of your life if you don't want to.
I still do
Um,
that in my off time, but
Bean counting, that's good. It's good and
yeah.
it's fun and it's cathartic. I mean, just depending on who you ask, but
Yeah.
um So, and I also want to say kudos to you on taking the leap and doing that coding boot camp because that's hard. It's expensive
Yeah.
and it's a little bit scary, especially when you don't know. There's no guarantee that it's gonna do what you want it to do, or it's gonna turn out the way you want it to. So, kudos for you on doing that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, given your experience on being bookkeeper turned software developer, do you mind if I ask you a couple specific questions about that?
Yeah. Shoot away.
Okay, perfect. So, question number one: what were some of the biggest lessons in your time as a bookkeeper?
Yeah. I think that the biggest lesson that I kind of want to impart on anybody who is out there currently is that your personal finances are going to be reflected in your business finances.
Mm,
So if you do not manage your personal finances super well, that is going to come through in the business, whether that's in how you treat revenue that comes into your business or more directly if you're pulling too much money out of it. That's a big thing I've seen with like do it yourself or people who are on the smaller end of the spectrum in terms of like getting the company up and running. They're still in those early days.
hmm,
Is that, you have these two kind of separate dichotomies, right? You have the one end where there's a person who will just not pay themselves anything. Everything gets reinvested back into the business and they're just like, yes, this is how it needs to be. And I think that's unhealthy in its own way
hmm,
because you are doing something, you should be compensated for it. And then there's the other extreme of the spectrum, which is like, oh, I have a business. I can expense these things and then, take them off on the taxes. And
hmm,
also, look at this. I brought in, $300,000 of revenue today. Oh, that
hmm,
must mean that I have the ability to take, 100 or $150,000 out for my own self. And that's just, pure profit, right?
hmm,
So that's one of the things that I think is the number one thing
Hmm.
that I see with kind of smaller scale companies is just that you really should, if you think about it, maybe even before getting a bookkeeper, is get somebody to help you manage your personal
Wow.
finances.
Yeah.
Uh, I
I,
mean, ideally get both,
right.
but
Yeah, it's so interesting you should say that, Mark, because it's the old saying, and I'm not gonna remember exactly what the saying is, but it's something to the effect of like what you do with the little bit is gonna have a reflection on what you do with the big stuff, right? It's the little
exactly.
things, it's the make your bed in the morning kind of stuff that really impacts a lot more than you expect. And you don't necessarily think about it when you talk about a bookkeeper coming in and keeping your books, but I mean that's a really good insight that whatever's going on in your personal life is going to have kind of a bleed over impact on your small business. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Any other lessons you can think of in just even in terms of things you've learned in practicing and running your own practice for a couple years?
Yeah, I think one thing that is something that sticks out to me, and actually, weirdly enough, something that sticks out to me more now that I'm outside of bookkeeping looking in than it did while I was inside of the field, which is kind of weird, is the fact that, bookkeeping, it's actually surprisingly difficult.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times you get people who go around and they say, "Oh, I'll have, my grandma do it or my niece or whoever do the bookkeeping and all that." Because, it's kind of seen as the easy stepchild of accounting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the perception. But the thing is, based on how many people I've talked to are having issues with cleaning up books, people who are constantly in groups like accountant groups asking, hey, how do you go about this particular problem? How do you record this? Is there this legal thing I need to keep in mind for that? There's so much that, like, when you think about bookkeeping, you think of, and this is if you actually know what bookkeeping is. I think most business owners out there don't even know what bookkeeping really is,
Mm-hmm.
to be quite fair.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's
but you
true.
think of it, and you think of it as like this little circle, and that's a very easy circle to work with. But then when you think about all the other stuff that kind of goes into it, it just kind of expands and bloats out
Hmm.
to a point where I don't think it's reasonable to expect anybody who works on a business normally to know what all they need to do with bookkeeping.
Interesting. Interesting. When you think about that, like as you're saying that, there's like three or four things that come to my mind. I'm curious from your perspective, like what would be like one example of that kind of overbloat, like scope creep of bookkeeping?
Yes. Let's go with one of the more, I guess, obvious examples of bookkeeping and kind of the challenges with it. And let's go into something like e-commerce or something like that.
Hmm.
You know, you think, oh, it's just recording sales and it's just recording, expenses and all that stuff. But recording them in a way that's correct, keeping up with taxes, keeping up with, I don't know, like just how you actually cost the inventory.
Hmm.
There's just a bunch of little things that you don't really think about when you're thinking about it as like, oh, I'm just selling stuff. This is cool. It's you don't think about it too deeply until you're an accountant and you have to, because otherwise your financial statements will either be off or they will be misleading.
Mm-hmm.
One of those two things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the same thing applies to, assets in general. I think that most business owners do not have the time or the um, knowledge to deal with assets most of the time in terms of like actually recording them
Hmm.
correctly.
Hmm. Yeah, like inventory, fixed assets, whatever else
Yeah,
like that. Yeah, I can definitely see
exactly.
that. Yeah, I like to refer to bookkeeping like true blue bookkeeping. I like to refer to it as financial story writing because at the end of the day, that's really what we're doing in accounting, right?
That's
Like
why it's called bookkeeping. You're writing a
you're
story.
literally and people think to themselves, oh, books like the books. You never really make that connection, but like bookkeeping is literally about storytelling.
Yeah,
That's what accounting
exactly.
is. We're just telling a story. We write stories and then we speak them to the folks and stuff. Anyway, but yeah, bookkeeping. If you're not like clear on, what all is encompassed in bookkeeping. I mean, because bookkeeping can mean a lot of different things, to be totally honest.
Yes, that is true in its own self.
Yeah. So I can definitely see that. So talk to me a little bit about the skills, right? So you had been doing bookkeeping for a couple of years. You had owned your own practice. I'm assuming you picked up a number of skills in doing that really lent itself well to then what you were doing in your coding work. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those skills were?
Yeah. So I think that there's really two skills that come to my mind as things that kind of go hand in hand with programming in my experience. The first thing is just looking for the little things that are out of place. A lot of programming is just trying to find where and this is something only people who know a little bit about code will probably understand, like finding the little mistakes that you make when you're programming. Like there's a semicolon missing somewhere and you have to read through this giant wall of text to find where this one thing is missing. And that's a skill set I think is very closely related to accounting, where a lot of times you're just kind of looking through books. And I don't know if everybody feels this way, but at least when I was bookkeeping, one of my superpowers was just kind of going through these reports or going through transactions and then like zeroing in on, wait a minute, what's this number right here?
That's not right.
Exactly.
Yeah, having a debit balance and a liability, you're like, what is this? Get that out of here.
So that's something that you actually surprisingly helpful. And then the other part is the fact that programming and accounting are very similar in the fact that you have to know everything that kind of goes on in an organization. In order to correctly record transactions, you have to know the whys behind it, right? So that same thing kind of applies to programming, where you have to know what the problem you're solving is. And that requires you to have detailed knowledge of basically all of the different aspects of the companies that you're working with. So kind of just that ability to learn, okay, how am I going to figure out in a way that makes it so I don't lose my mind what is going on with this company from a high level view so I can make something that works for them. And yeah, I think that's a skill that comes very well from people who come from an accounting background.
Yeah, that is really, really good. And as you're saying that, the first point that you had made, it really speaks to the attention to detail stuff, right?
Yeah.
And people say, what makes, sorry, one second. People say what makes, or ask a question like what makes a bookkeeper or an accountant successful, and like one of the top rated skills or abilities is attention to detail. You gotta dot your I's and cross your T's. And I feel like the way you said it was perfect, and why there's such a great connection between bookkeeping skills, accounting skills, and software development skills, because that same level of rigor and pinpoint focus can be really, really helpful. Yes. So I think that's brilliant. And then what you had said, that second part that you had said, just about remind me again, restate that second piece you were just saying.
Yeah, just kind of understanding the company as a whole,
right?
Understanding the different functions.
That big picture understanding. In theory, if you're going to be a good bookkeeper, you got to understand the business. And likewise, if you're going to build a good tool, or if you're going to support from a software development perspective a good tool, well, that tool is going to exist in an ecosystem of the business. You can't just assume that you can just focus in on this one little piece. It's how it fits into the big picture that's really important. So
yeah,
that's really good.
I think that's a big challenge a lot with companies that try to bring apps into the marketplace, by the way. It's just this like, oh, we're programmers, we're so smart, we can figure out a problem or how to fix any problem. And so they rush into like be the saviors or the heroes of the day for the accounting industry. And then you get disappointing apps that are out there. It's like, they tried.
Yeah,
they tried.
Less than ideal results for sure. That's definitely the case. Quick aside for everybody who is listening, thank you so much for joining us live. Go ahead and drop a comment in. I'm trying to get better about this. This is the 4th episode now, and I have yet to respond to live comments. So I've got my YouTube pulled over here. And I'd love to hear from you guys. We do have one question that comes from Serena. Shout out to Serena. Thank you so much for submitting this question. Just to give some background, Serena is a recent college grad. And so her question has to do with what are some ways that she or somebody in her position with relatively no experience or background in bookkeeping or in accounting, what are some ways that they could set themselves apart for that first job, that entry-level job in accounting or bookkeeping?
Yeah, I think that there's two things that I kind of keep in mind here. The first thing is just, get out there. I think a lot of times people are so focused on differentiating themselves, like you have to have some kind of special thing. There's a guy, he owns a baseball team called the Savannah Bananas or something like that. And his big thing is that he wears like a yellow suit everywhere. And so everybody recognizes him. Oh, that's the Savannah Bananas guy or something like that. And everybody thinks that, you have to have that level of differentiation in order to stand out or something like that. Or you have to be the expert on, let's use my case, digital marketing agencies. Like you have to be the person who knows everything that'll ever be known, all that distinction. Honestly, the biggest thing you can do is just get your name out there. Let people know you exist. Ideally, you have some form of like passion that you have that can kind of speak to your, oh, yeah, you should talk to this person because they are like really big into, I don't know, let's go with a really boring example here and say they're really into taxes.
Hey. No, I'm just kidding. I don't like tax.
Exactly.
I'm not a tax guy.
Yeah. Or, even if it's something that's not specifically accounting related, like somebody who has a really big passion for horses or bowling or some weird other thing, try to kind of let that passion show through you a little bit. But in general, just, be out there, let people know that you are an accounting graduate or that you're kind of going to accounting, because nobody's going to refer you anything or nobody's going to offer you anything if they don't know what you do or what you're looking for. I think that's the big thing. It's just making sure people know, what are you looking for? Because I know that me personally, if I ever run into somebody who does something cool, first thing that goes on in my head is there somebody I know who needs something cool like this? And so people will do that for you if you let them know you exist and you let them know what you are looking for.
That's good. That's really good.
There was a second part to that. Don't remember it whatsoever.
Second part being second idea that you had, kind of going with that. Yeah, that's really good. Well, you talk about showing up, and just from a purely practical standpoint, Mark, you post almost every day, if not every day, on LinkedIn, right?
I think I give myself one day a week where I just don't go on LinkedIn at all.
That's smart. I need to
otherwise,
learn from that.
I do try to post once a day.
So you're posting regularly. I'm posting regularly. So just from a standpoint of like getting your name out there, interact with our posts, and you're going to get seen by other people, other accountants, other folks. That's a great way, I find, to let people know what you're about.
Yeah. And the thing about that is that applies to more than just accounting. That's just success in any area of your life. It's just knowing people. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche to say, but your network is your net worth, right? I mean, and I don't mean that from just a purely monetary standpoint too. I love the fact that we connected on LinkedIn, Tony. Like this is a super fulfilling relationship. I love talking to you. And I've met a lot of cool people once I kind of really put that effort in to be like, hey, let's get myself out there. Let's learn about all these awesome people. So
yeah, it's so great. And I love that too. Cause it's like, I'm in Minnesota. You're in North Carolina.
Yes.
Oh, I remembered it. Okay, good. Okay. But yeah, we're super far. I mean, not super far, but like we're far enough away. It's not like we're going to go drive and meet for coffee, but we're still able to meet because of LinkedIn and because of being present on LinkedIn and all that stuff. So all this to say, especially for those fresh college grads, people who are looking for that first time job, I think just showing up, Mark, what you said was great. Just show up and be your full self, and like know that, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff, especially entry level stuff, is not that hard. What I personally was looking for when I was a hiring manager is like, I'm looking for somebody who has the fire in them. You know, somebody who's
Yeah.
intrinsically motivated, somebody who is who is going to get the job done and who is open to learning. Because at that point, like, nobody really, heck, I know people who are 5, 6, 7 years into their career and they still don't really know what they're doing. Like, it takes time.
Yeah.
So I would just say, you know, a lot of the soft skills are super important for that fresh college grad. So for sure.
Completely agree with you there.
Yeah. So not to completely derail from that conversation, but I do have a couple more pressing questions as it relates to this pivot from bookkeeper to software developer. So, talking about you developing this for the QuickBooks app, the Chrome extension that you're developing, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned working on an app for QuickBooks?
Yeah. So the biggest lessons I've learned is, before I used to, whenever there was a system error where like an app just didn't work quite right, or whenever I thought, oh man, QuickBooks is just monumentally slow at adding in features, I would always kind of think that when I was a bookkeeper, like, oh, why can't they get this right? Something you see once you're on the other side of it and you're actually looking at what the code behind is. QuickBooks does a lot of work on the back end. They process a lot of data you don't even see on the back end. So one thing I kind of want to put out there is that if you're ever like frustrated, like, why is QuickBooks so gosh dang slow to fix this crap? I guarantee you it's because of the fact that they have like 50 things in place to make sure that and it's important that your data doesn't get screwed up on like a fundamental level. Like there's a difference between data being screwed up because somebody, put in like a bank feed, they put something into revenue when they should have matched it to an invoice. That's a fixable mistake. I'm talking about like on the fundamental level, like the program glitches out on you or something and puts something in the completely wrong spot. They are working very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's a lot of data that goes into that. So that's one of the big things I've learned is just to kind of have grace with them a little bit because it is not as easy as one would expect or hope it would be.
Yeah, man, it's so good you say that because for me, it's super easy because I've never been in the spot of being a developer. It's so easy for me to be like, well, this is just stupid. Like, why is it the way that it is? But like you said, there's a lot of stuff that you don't see going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so being patient with them, that's bound to go far. So that's really good. So it sounds like you've learned a lot in the process of developing. You see behind the curtains in just a new and a fresh way.
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I like to say that I've learned more about bookkeeping from working on this app than I did in the actual time I was bookkeeping.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I never really cared that much for QuickBooks Online when I was a bookkeeper, but now that I'm like working in it, I actually really love the program. I know that's crazy to say. Like, I feel like nobody feels that way except for like a very select group of nerds.
I would agree with that statement because I'm just not a nerd, so that's why no, but I definitely
you're just a nerd in different ways.
I'm an accounting nerd. It's different, but no, I say to people all the time, I'm like, yeah, QuickBooks Online. I was like, it's a necessary evil. Sometimes it's what I feel like, but
yeah,
you have a greater appreciation now because you get to see the bells and the whistles. You get to see behind the scenes. Now, I have a question for you on that note. Yeah. You are building MonkBe, which is a Google Chrome extension, not a standalone app.
Yeah.
So why did you choose an extension rather than a traditional app?
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed as an accountant is that a lot of people would have to get all these extra apps in order to do what I would consider somewhat basic features inside of QuickBooks Online. So, you might have at the end of the day, like you're like, oh, I have this one requirement for this business that it's not like a huge thing, but I need to get another app in order to work with it. And what ended up happening for me is I got a little overwhelmed with the app overload. I'm a very singular minded person. I like to be on one thing and just look at that the entire time. I don't like to be going to 15 tabs at one time going like, okay, let's pull this here, all that stuff. It just doesn't work for me. So the reason I made MonkBe an extension is that I want to be able to make it so people, if there's these little features, one, they don't have to get a whole expensive app. They can get something that just does kind of like a bare minimum feature that still gets them where they need to go. And two, I want it to be something where they can do it inside of QuickBooks. You can do it without having to go anywhere else, and it just fits in naturally with your workflow. And I think that that is super important, is making something that naturally fits into your workflow rather than having to go and train people like, oh, here's where you go now for this part, and then having documents everywhere about how you work with every single app in your ecosystem.
If I didn't know any better, I'd say you are of the mindset that technology should just work in an ecosystem as opposed to just being its own standalone thing. Is that right?
I think that there is value in standalone things. But there are also like invoicing tools and stuff like that where like there is value because QuickBooks is certainly not a comprehensive invoicing tool. Let's get that straight. But there are things where some people just don't need that level of like complicatedness added on, like that extra layer. And I'm definitely of the opinion. I like to say I'm a programmer, but I also am not like a tech person at the same time. So I'm very much of the opinion you get the process down first. I don't worry about the tech at first, and then after that, that's when you bring in all the other stuff. I know there's some people who just love testing out tech and they're just like, I'm ready to try every new thing out there. That is not me in any way, shape, or form.
And this is coming from a software developer. So that's got to say something.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that you said that though, Mark, because this is something I harp on all the time. People, process, technology. That's the triangle.
Yeah.
People, process, technology. That is what delivers results. And a lot of times, especially in today's day and age, with technology being what it is, we can oftentimes look to technology to be the end-all, be-all, but that needs to be potentially one of the last things that you actually implement. You got to get the right people, and you got to get the right process. Otherwise, your technology is only going to help you fail faster.
Yeah, and I will say I'm definitely a person who has fallen victim to this. Sometimes you just see something really cool online. You're like, you see a video about it, and you're like, that's a cool tool. I'm going to use it. And then you take it up, and it's like, oh, it's cool in theory, but then once you actually get to using it, it's like, oh, do I really need this? So
Yeah.
I'm very guilty of that.
Yeah, it's definitely, and one that's easy. It's a slippery slope. It's super easy to get into that, where you're just like, ooh, new shiny thing, and then hop into that next thing, and yeah, it can be a little bit difficult. Well, I know I wish I could talk for so much longer.
Let's just do it.
Let's just
go on for an hour.
Throw caution to the wind. Let's just do it. We do try to keep these to 30 minutes ish roundabouts. Otherwise, I'd be like, Mark, let's just keep talking because this is great. So I think we're just gonna have to have you on again to share some knowledge bombs, some more things, more updates on MonkBe potentially next time. But before we're done asking questions, I have one last question for you. And this is something I need you to impart some wisdom for us, if you will. Okay?
Yeah.
So imagine you're talking to a DIYer. This is a person who they just love doing it themselves. And they're building a business, and they're a DIY business builder. And they're considering whether or not they want to also DIY their own books or if they want to hire somebody to do it. What parting words of wisdom would you, Mark Corum, give to that DIYer?
Yeah. So in terms of that, you have to figure out if you want to hire it out or if you want to keep doing it yourself. And I have two things to say to that. The first thing is if you're not doing it yourself, then you probably just need to hire a bookkeeper. I mean, that's just a straight up fact in its own self. The second part is if you are doing it yourself, I know that a lot of bookkeepers out there will offer a free consultation. Just let them know, hey, I'm not necessarily looking to get a bookkeeper. I'm just looking to see if I need one. So let them know before the consultation, but then ask them, let them go into your books a little bit. And if they tell you, oh, this is going to require cleanup, then that's probably a good sign that you're not doing your bookkeeping right. And you need somebody who maybe is a little bit more expert at it. So that's kind of my recommendation there is just, if you're not sure, just have a consultation with somebody. They'll let you know.
That's really good. That's really good. And I'm glad that you said that, because I don't know if people listening to this hear that. But sometimes it can feel like, oh, but I don't want to bother them. They're so busy. It's like literally this, if it's a worthwhile bookkeeper, they will take time to just have that consultation and just to like hear where your pain points are, and maybe be able to even shed a little bit of light on that. Quick plug on that note. If you guys are looking for a bookkeeper to have that initial conversation, I know of a number of very, very good bookkeepers. So please reach out to me. I would love to put you in contact with them. We want to make sure that people are supported and they understand their numbers. And sometimes it's doing the books yourself that's going to get you there. And sometimes it's going to be hiring somebody else to do it. So reach out to me. I would love to put you in contact with those people. But Mark, as a quick aside to you, thank you so much for being on the show today. If people wanted to get a hold of you, where are you at? Are you on Facebook? You on Instagram, TikTok? Where are you at?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. And technically speaking, you can find me on Facebook, but I don't post anything there, and I haven't done it for like 5 years at this point. So, I check Facebook, but I never post on there. So LinkedIn, just look for Mark Corum. If you're connected to Tony, I'll show up there. I don't think there's that many Mark Corums out there.
And we interact with each other, I think, every single day on our posts.
True. Look in Tony's comment section.
He's like almost always the first person to comment. It's my favorite thing. I go to the gym in the morning, I posted something, I come back from the gym, and then Mark's there, and I'm like, yes, his comment's right there. Okay, perfect. Well, people reach out on LinkedIn. Can they email you too? Is there a good email address for you?
Yeah, markjcorum@gmail.com. Just a nice, normal email.
Straightforward. Perfect. Yeah. Well, I would highly recommend anybody listening to this, reach out to Mark. He's an amazing guy. I've enjoyed getting to know him. I'd consider him my friend. So, Mark, thank you yet again. And thank you, everybody who has had the chance to listen in today. I hope you found value in what we had talked about. If you have a pressing accounting question that you would like some of our future guests to answer, you can email them to me at tony@equip.com. That's ACCQUIP.com. Also, if you are an accounting professional or you know somebody who might be interested in coming on the show, please reach out to me as well. Thank you all for tuning in, and as always, keep calm and keep your clothes on.